All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the 1883 Speaker Series. My name is Mike Wozniak. I serve as the Coordinator of Leadership and Programming in the Student Involvement and Parent Programs Office. Over the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds, we'll explore a new lesson in leadership and gain valuable insights to support both our personal and professional growth. For today's speaker, please join me in welcoming the Associate Vice President and Advisor to the President for Community and Belonging at UND, Dr. Tamba-Kuii Bailey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Whoa, I'm sounding really loud. Thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I want to say that I've been really fortunate and blessed to have been around a lot of wonderful leaders all of my life. And to those leaders, I'm really thankful and appreciative. Those leaders stood when no one else would. Those leaders marched when no one else could. And those leaders gave so that I can. And so that I'm so appreciative of those leaders. At UND, I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of great, wonderful leaders in the last 4 years. 4 leaders in particular that have really meant a lot to me, and I just want to say thank you so much. So thank you to Dr. Stacy, to Shelby, to Dr. Jeff, and to Keith. Thank you all so much. I really do appreciate the leadership that you all have provided to the university, to this community. It means so much. Maybe I should be moving slides forward. These are those 4 people. I also want to say that there are leaders everywhere, and we have to find those leaders, and we have to appreciate the work that they do. And so I also want to say thank you to the counseling psych counseling programs, to those leaders in that program. They've been leaders here at UND, and they've been leaders in the field of psychology, and so I'm really appreciative. And I'm really thankful for Drs. Cindy Jutnan, for Dr. Carl Wetterson, and Dr. Rachel Navarro, as well as Dr. Christine Ye. They have been wonderful people to me. They are wonderful leaders, and they have shown me what leadership and justice looks like in higher education. So I'm really appreciative of those individuals. So I actually want to start by telling a little story. I want to tell a story about a black woman named Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was born in 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi. She was born on a plantation. She was the youngest of 20 children to her parents. She grew up in a 3-room house. They had no bathroom, and they had no running water. Her parents were sharecroppers. They picked cotton. They lived in poverty. But for her parents, they made sure that her and her siblings had everything they needed. They had clothes on their back, they had food on the table, and they had a place to stay, and that was really important. They were also concerned with Fannie Lou getting an education. And so they made sure that her being the youngest of their children, that she started school. And so Fannie Lou did that. She went to school. Fannie Lou, she went to school, and at 6 years old, she was first approached by the planter, by the owner of this plantation, to pick cotton. It seemed innocuous. He said, I want to see if you can pick 200 pounds of cotton in a week. And if you do, I'll get you some Cracker Jacks, I'll get you some little toys, and I'll get you some of those things. And Fannie Lou said, okay. And so she did it as a means of what seemed like a game to her, but it was really her inheritance. Her inheritance of being forever indebted to someone else. And so she picked the cotton, she got the candy, and from that point on, she went to school and she picked cotton, up until the age of 12 years old. At 12 years old, Fannie Lou stopped going to school. At 12 years old, with less than an 8th grade education, Fannie Lou Hamer went and worked in the cotton fields beside her older siblings and her parents. Imagine at 12 years old, you taking on this responsibility of picking cotton, trying to help your family survive. And so she did that. She did that into adulthood. Fannie Lou, she moved out of her home, she met her husband, she got married, and they continue to be sharecroppers. So in Sunflower County, in Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hamer was a sharecropper. That was her inheritance. And then in 1962, at 44 years old, she heard that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, was coming to town. She heard that SNCC was going to talk about something that she had never thought about in her life. That she heard SNCC was going to come and talk about voting rights. She didn't believe black people had the right to vote, but she said, I'm going to go hear what they're going to talk about. And so in this meeting, they did talk about voting rights. They talked about voting rights. They talked about how do we end segregation, how do we end Jim Crow law in the South, and how do we gain equality for all people in this country. Something that she had never heard of before, and something that forever changed Fannie Lou Hamer's life. In that meeting, at that moment, Fannie Lou Hamer made a decision. She made a decision that she was going to dedicate her life to justice. She was going to dedicate her life to obtaining the right to vote, not just for herself, but for her community. She was going to end segregation in the South. She was going to end Jim Crow apartheid law. And so Fannie Lou Hamer, I want to say, she didn't become a leader just in that moment, right? It wasn't that day that she became a leader. She actually just went to work. She went to work like everybody else. She worked with SNCC, she worked with people in her community, and she was trying to get people registered to vote. She herself went to go register to vote. She went down to the county building in her county, and she submitted her application of sorts to register. Back then, you had to pay a poll tax. And in many places, a poll tax was just that. It was a fee you had to pay. Around this time, it was $1.50. If you were white in that county, you only had to pay for that year. If you were black in that county, you would never register to vote. Your responsibility was to pay for every year before that, up until that moment that you wanted to register to vote. So she did. She attempted to register to vote. That same day, she got home, and the owner of the plantation met Fannie Lou at her door. And he said, Fannie Lou, we're not ready in this county to have black folks vote. We're just not ready. And he said, so I need you to go down and I need you to withdraw your application to register to vote. He said, I need you to do that now. And so Fannie Lou, she realized how much this would impact her, her husband, their livelihood, and the work that they do. And she made a decision. She said that I am committed to fighting injustice. I'm committed to fighting for voting rights. And so that's what she did. She was fired from her job. She could no longer live on the plantation, and she had to go live with friends. But she did not let that stop her in what she wanted to do. Now, Fannie Lou, as I said, she was working, and people saw something in Fannie Lou they didn't see in other folks. They saw somebody who was dedicated to the community. They saw someone who was able to galvanize and organize the community as it relates to obtaining voting rights. And so they asked Fannie Lou to be a leader in the community, to help them register people to vote, to help them exercise their first citizenship rights in this country. And it was then when Fannie Lou first experienced the first attempt on her life. She was staying with friends, and then one day a car drove by and they shot 16 times at the house that she was staying in. It was intimidation. It was hatred. It was discrimination. And Fannie Lou said, I need to press on. Ain't gonna let nothing turn me around, right? And so Fannie Lou kept going. She engaged in rallies and demonstration, voter registration drives all across the state of Mississippi. And as she was doing this, she recognized that while this was an easy decision to make, it was a hard journey to live. She knew that it wasn't going to happen overnight. And so for her, she would go to these demonstrations, voter registration drives. Oftentimes, she would sing various spirituals. And one of those spirituals that she would sing would be Wade in the Water. It went something like this. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble these waters. Okay, now I know I cannot sing. Fannie Lou can sing. I can't sing. I got the spirit, but I can't sing. But my imagination tells me that Fannie Lou sang that spiritual for two reasons. First, that spiritual says that we have to lead. wade in the water, children. It says step forward, right? My imagination also tells me that she sang that song because of faith. It is a spiritual about faith. It says that we have to believe. We have to believe with all our might that path is ordained, and we will reach that path. We will reach the goal that we're reaching, and we will bring those with us who are following. And so that's what she did. She continued to fight. She continued to ask to demand for the right to vote. That's an affirming leader. Fannie Lou continued this work, and Fannie Lou tried to, and the black people in Mississippi, they tried to get delegates to sit at the Democratic National Convention. The Democratic National Convention said no. And so Fannie Lou Hamer and some of her colleagues, they formed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And they said, we are a party. We are a recognized group. We should have the right to sit at the table with everyone else. And this was 1964, about to go into 1965. And at that point in Mississippi, 45% of the state's population identified as being black. Less than 5% of those people were registered voters in the state. So what did that mean? That means that they were disenfranchised. That means they did not have the right to see people who looked like them as elected officials, and they did not have the right to vote. And so Fannie Lou Hamer, along with this delegation, they went to the Democratic National Convention, and they were told they would only get 2 seats, not 45% or more of the delegates from the state of Mississippi. And so what she said is that doesn't represent who we are. And so she kept fighting. She continued to press on. She said, this has to go beyond the state of Mississippi. This has to go across the country. And that's what she did. This 44-year-old woman with less than an 8th grade education went across this country, leading people in voter registration, helping people understand the importance of voting rights. And it was in 1965 that we saw the Voting Rights Act passed in this country that was largely in part due to the work of Fannie Lou Hamer. This hidden figure, this unspoken person, this person who never gave up, this affirming leader. And so after the Voting Rights Act was passed, Fannie Lou Hamer didn't stop. She said, we need to continue to work on civil rights. We need to work on fair housing. We need to work on food insecurities. We need to work on justice in job place. She said, all these things are important, not just to me, to everyone. Everyone is entitled to these rights. And she said, I'm going to continue to fight until I see that happen. And so what makes Fannie Lou Hamer a leader? What makes her an affirming leader? Fannie Lou Hamer was concerned with the community. She put the community needs above her own individual needs. She cared for her community. That's what made her an affirming leader. All too often when we talk about, I'm getting too excited and I'm not moving forward with pictures. This is actually from the SNCC, and this is actually an image of Fannie Lou Hamer. So I apologize, I feel good today. So Fannie Lou Hamer continued to help people organize. She continued to do this work, but the question becomes, what made Fannie Lou Hamer such an affirming leader? And as I said, she cared. She cared for the people for whom she worked. Fannie Lou Hamer was arrested. She was beaten. She received and experienced permanent physical injury because of the beating. She never stopped. That is an affirming leader. So when we go beyond Fannie Lou Hamer, we think about leadership. Oftentimes people talk about leaders, and they talk about leadership in a way of who you know or where you're from, right? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Who did you know? And they don't talk about what you know. And so it's important for us to think about what you know. It's important for us to think about how do we understand the issues of the communities that we lead. So Reverend Jesse Jackson, he talked about this idea of the culture of caring and the culture of knowing. He said, while it's important to know, we must also have a culture of caring, care for the individuals for whom we lead. That is affirming leadership. So we must recognize that affirming leadership is not about titles, it's not about standing or status, it's not about what school you went to. It is about how do we affirm the communities that we lead. Ella Baker, in her eloquence and her brilliance as a leader, said that we must understand the communities that we lead. She said leaders must live in the community. They must learn from those individuals that they lead, and that's truly being a leader for the community. So when we think about affirmative leadership or affirming leadership, it must be really seen in four ways. First, we must think about affirming leadership being rooted in agape love, being rooted in inclusion. Dr. King talked about love and leadership, and he said leaders should not be in love with themselves. They shouldn't be in love with the fame. They shouldn't be in love with money. They need to be in love with justice. They need to be in love with humanity. They need to be in love with healing. That's an affirming leader. He said that exclusionary practices and hate, that it has no place in affirming leadership. And so he talked about this notion of agape love. He said agape love is understanding. It looks for understanding. It looks for caring. It looks for redemption. And he said it doesn't ask for anything back. And that's what we have to have when we're talking about affirming leadership. That's really important. Nelson Mandela talked about that when we think about leadership, we have to talk about how do we listen to the communities that we lead. That is so important that we listen and we understand. Rosalind Pellis says that when we talk about leadership, we have to look for those leaders who have heart and who have commitment to caring for their community. That's this idea of how do we listen and learn from our community. It has to be driven by the community when we start thinking about affirming leadership. Affirming leadership also has to be centered in civil and human rights. We cannot leave anybody behind. We must understand that if we are not okay, if the community is not okay, if the least of us are not okay, then something is wrong. And we have to continue to fight to fix that in our community. Finally, affirmative leadership has to lead from behind. We have to put the issues, the goals of the community above our own. We also have to look for leaders in our communities. All too often, we bring people from the outside and they tell us that they can lead us. And they don't know our organizations, they don't know our communities, they don't know who we are. We have to look for those leaders who are in this space with us right now. These are the leaders of tomorrow, and we have to recognize them as such. The other thing is that we can't leave anyone behind. That we have to serve as a rock for those individuals through the storm, and we have to be present for them. That's what it means to be a leader. Now, affirmative leadership is hard. It's not easy. It means we have to make sacrifice. It means that we have to continue with the struggle. It means that we may experience loss and we may experience setback, but we have to be focused on our goals. It is important for us then that we truly understand what it means to lead. And as we look for affirming leaders, Rosalind Pellis tells us that we can't just look for a standard package of leaders, that we must recognize that affirming leaders are all around us. Affirming leaders can come in all sizes. Affirming leaders can be women. Affirming leaders can be gay, bisexual, transgender. Affirming leaders can be people with disabilities. Affirming leaders can be people of color. It can be people who are Muslim, who are Jewish, who are Catholic, who are Baha'i. Affirming leaders can be anyone in this room. But we have to affirm the communities that we lead. We must allow and empower the communities so that we can hear their voices. We must find those leaders. We must work with those leaders. We must recognize that leaders are every day. It is important that we do this as we affirm leadership in our community. It is important that we stand together. It's important that we stand with those leaders, and it's important that we hold those leaders accountable. John Lewis, when he talked about leadership, John Lewis said that he talked about it in a way that we understand legacy. He said that every generation has a legacy. And he said that legacy is determined by the individuals of that generation. And so I ask you all, when you all think about leadership, I want you to think about your leadership and what legacy you plan to leave behind. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey. Thanks to all of you for coming as well. Join us December 3rd for our final speaker of the semester, the Executive Director of the Grand Forks Children's Museum, Katie Meyer. Have a great rest of your week and happy Thanksgiving.